Well, it took me some time, but I finally finished the freshman season of Dune Prophecy, and I guess some stuff happened in it, and some things occurred. Now, it should be no surprise to anyone that I am a huge fan of the two Dune movies. Denis Villeneuve is currently crafting a trilogy that, should it stick the landing, would be able to rival some of the greats. The once deemed unadaptable Dune book is now the subject of two of the biggest sci-fi movies in recent times. For me, watching Dune in theaters was probably the closest feeling I'll get to how people felt watching the original Star Wars in theaters for the first time. And part 2 was so insanely fun that I went to rewatch it every chance I got. I love these movies. So it would make sense that I was pretty optimistic when Legendary announced the Dune spin-off centered around the mysterious Bene Gesserit, then titled Dune, the Sisterhood. I was really excited to get some more depth around the enigmatic order of witches that pulled the strings from the shadows in the Dune universe. Everything was looking bright. Villeneuve was gonna direct the pilot and everything, except that was back in 2019, and a lot has changed since then. The series was delayed due to the writer's strike. It replaced showrunners and producers several times, and even got a name change. And after all that, on November 17th, 5 years after its announcement, Dune Prophecy's first episode was released on Max. The series takes place over 10,000 years before the events of Dune, and it follows two Harkonnen sisters, Valia and Tula. Valia is the Reverend Mother of the Sisterhood, an all-female order of witches that will eventually become the Bene Gesserit. The Sisterhood acts as truth-sayers to the various ruling houses, but they secretly pull strings from the shadows to accomplish their own goals, which, at the time, is to have a sister sitting on the Imperial throne. Now, all that sounds pretty cool to me, but let's see if this show actually lives up to this enticing premise. Now, right off the bat, I want to say that the visuals as a whole are pretty good. I mean, it's definitely missing the cinematography of Greg Fraser and Villeneuve's directing, but that's like saying that your local 5-star Italian restaurant isn't as good as a real meal in Italy. Like, yeah, of course one is gonna be better, but the other is perfectly fine. I also like how unique each planet we see in the show is. 90% of the Dune movies take place on Arrakis, which works fine for those movies, but it's nice that we get to see all of these different locations. It helps this universe feel a lot more fleshed out and bigger in scale. The set design is also just as impressive as the films, in my opinion, and it helps to make them all feel like part of the same story. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty pleased overall with how well this show connects to the larger Dune universe. It's not the in-your-face key jangling that I was kind of expecting. It's just small references here and there and similar aspects that feel very natural and coherent with the movies. I like how the first episode starts with a quote, just like how the films did it. I like how the score has some similarities to Hans Zimmer's, but it has its own identity and it fits the vibe of the show pretty well. I especially like the theme song. I didn't skip it a single time. I also like the time frame that the series explores. The idea of humanity in the aftermath of a very recent war with the thinking machines is a very creative concept, and I like how its recency plays a role in the story. Now, the place where the problems start to come out for me is definitely in the writing for both the script and the overall plot. But this is really tough for me to articulate because it's not exactly bad per se, I just wanted a lot more out of it. Everything about this show from a writing standpoint is just okay. The dialogue is believable and it suits the story well, but it feels mostly bland and stale and everyone kind of talks the same. I feel like I could pick out individual lines from each episode and there'd be no way for you to guess who said it. The premise, while engaging at face value, was executed pretty flimsily and I had a hard time getting invested in most aspects of it. And this problem is kind of at the core of why I just couldn't get 100% on board with this series. You see, I love a good story about political intrigue. Different factions, each with their own unique motivations, all plotting and scheming on each other is so much fun if it's done well. Keyword, if. Because I personally feel like political stories are the hardest to get right. The Dune movies worked well because Paul is one of the most complex and engaging sci-fi characters ever put to screen. People care about the conflict surrounding him because the story made us care about him first. When most of your story is just people talking, you need to have very engaging characters and very good performances to go with it, and I just feel like this show has neither of that. And not to say that any of the performances were bad, it's just that none of them really stole the show or stuck out to me. It also doesn't help that the show doesn't do a very good job at making me care about the characters either. The conflict itself also feels pretty small in scope for what are supposedly very important events. Funny enough, I actually found myself more invested in the flashbacks than the actual storyline. Watching Valia struggle with her loyalty to her family over her loyalty to the Sisterhood, and then being the first to discover the voice, which she then uses to make the Reverend Mother kill herself, is all great stuff. I liked Tula's backstory too, as she kills her love to avenge her brother, and then has to hide the baby she had with him. To me, this is way more interesting because we get to see the characters develop and watch the events that shaped them. Because when we do cut to the present day conflict, their development just feels kinda stagnant. I would much rather watch a show about Valia and Tula coming to power within the Sisterhood, rather than seeing them exercising it in the present day. With that being said, there still are some elements that worked for me. I'm a big fan of Desmond Hart as a character. He's the only one that felt unique, and he plays an interesting role in the story as a sort of wild card. I like how unstable he feels, like he could just snap at any minute.
Say how the Sisterhood is connected to the rebellion. You give me something I can use, I shall spare your life.
No joke, if this dude stared at me like that, I'd run for my life. The mystery of his powers is pretty fun too. It's honestly the most engaging element out of the show, and I like how he has some mysterious ties to Arrakis that I hope pay off in the second season. I also like that quick little fight in the finale. Watching Valia use nothing but the voice to defend herself and then having a fight with Desmond using nothing but their mental abilities is nothing short of awesome. It's a great moment, but it just makes me wish that there were more like it. Oh, and another thing, this show randomly gets very dark at some moments, and it kind of just comes out of nowhere. I mean, I'm not complaining about it or anything, but like, damn. So yeah, overall, this show is just a whole lot of missed potential for me. Honestly, after watching the first 2 episodes, I was ready to give this show a much more scathing review. But after HBO renewed the show for another season and things started to pick up a little bit, my expectations did change. I didn't exactly feel hooked by the show, but by the time I finished the finale, I was at least mildly interested in any future additions to the story. Like I said before, there's nothing inherently bad about it. It's got some interesting aspects. I just wanted a lot more from it, and I feel like the potential of the premise and the time it's set in are never fully realized. But I guess we'll have to see if the next season makes any improvements on it. But for now, I'm gonna give Dune Prophecy a 6.5 out of 10. Could have been worse, but definitely could have been better.